All right. We are back. Welcome everybody to another installment of Rugby Scoop podcast. The show is recorded live. I'm your host, Pila Bitterhout. Of course, I'm not by myself. I'm joined by former Blitzbokker and Russian head coach, seventh head coach rather, Vuyo. Alongside him, we've got Hugh, the stats man, English, but also Welsh at the same time. And last but not least, our residence coach, Jade, all the way from Bloemfontein. Jade, I just literally got back from a Cheetahs versus POW game, which was played here in Amsterdam. I don't know if you caught a glimpse of that game. It literally just finished now. How are you doing? Okay, I think Jade is not there. Vuyo, how's it going?
Never start with Jade, Coop.
I've given up on Jade, actually. There's not enough electricity in Bloemfontein. Vickers, Miranda, how's the weather down in Port Elizabeth, or are you in Cape Town?
No, I'm in P. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, everything is good. Weather has been actually quite good. Yesterday, I went to the cricket, so I subbed the rugby for the cricket just for something different. But everything is good. Pretty much chilled on this side. Getting ready to pack up and go back to Russia next week.
Oh man, you need more clothes. Trust me, you need 20 bags and layers of clothing. It's incredibly cold. If Amsterdam is this cold, I can't imagine what Russia is probably going to be like. Hugh, how are things over there in the UK?
Cold. It has been cold for a good week now, especially in my office at work, where I'm sat underneath an air conditioning fan that has not been turned off. So I'm wearing a hat in the office. But yeah, all good. I am juggling about 1 million rugby games at the same time. It feels like trying to stay on top of all of it, but loving it as always.
All right, fantastic. Testing 1, 2, 3. Jade, Craig, can you hear me? I think Jade, there's something wrong there in Bloemfontein. Jade, can you hear us?
He's gone.
He's gone. Anyway, without wasting any time, gentlemen, we've got a lot of headlines this week. I mean, we've got Finn Russell being named Player of the Year in Scotland. We've got Marco Vunipola, who has retired from rugby. We've got Sean Everett, who signed a 2-year extension with Edinburgh. We've got sad news coming from Wales, JPR Williams, who just recently passed, who's been a great legend in Welsh footy. And obviously the British and Irish Lions. Maybe Hugh, you can maybe touch on that after these announcements. We've got Clive Woodward, who's been removed from ITV. Too much joy coming from the UK. Maybe not wasting any time. We've got Pandi Aki as well, a named Ireland Player of the Year. I think fully deserved. He had a fantastic Rugby World Cup 2023 for Ireland. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it past the QFs. Hugh, I mean, news on JPR. I mean, what have you made of the news, and how was it received in the Welsh rugby community?
Yeah, very sad. Everybody was heartbroken. There was a lot of very emotional tributes to him. His club, Bridgend, have retired the 15 jersey out of respect. And yeah, very much thought of as one of the best players ever to play at fullback, and one of those players who changed the game. And the players who came after him all were influenced by him. Of course, being a player from the 70s, I never got to see him play. He retired a long time before I was born. But the respect and the adoration that he had throughout the rest of his life, throughout Wales, it is really quite something, and you can really feel it amongst the community. Of course, a surgeon off the pitch as well. So
nice.
One of those rugby players who back in the day was clearly an educated and very well thought of man. Yeah. So sad times, and hopefully the memory of him can inspire lots of good in other people.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I don't think any of us in this podcast have ever got to see him live, unfortunately. But we've heard many good stories, many positive rugby stories and how brilliant he was. Vuyo, any thoughts on your side regarding JPR Williams?
Yeah, it's just one of those things where these guys now. I think someone said a while ago that the heroes and the legends that we saw are starting to get to that age where we're losing them, and it's quite sad for sport, of course. But yeah, like I say, it's one of those things where it's life taking its course. I mean, I mean, you can imagine our legends of 1980s, the 2000, the 1999 groups, the 90 to 99 groups, the 2000 are still a bit young, but these guys are getting old. So it is life taking its course. But you know, it's always sad when sports loses one of the legends.
Yeah, fair enough. It seems like we have Jade back into the system. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I'm
I'm
here.
testing
I'm
for the
here.
last
I'm
time.
here. Sorry, man. I have to go. I
Hey,
have to go fetch my
Mike.
laptop back from Cash Crusaders. January has been rough, eh? But anyway.
Anyway, how's it
For
going,
good or
Jade, on
good,
your
yeah. I
side?
just saw that Cheetahs Power game now. I was actually disappointed with the Cheetahs that got into the game, and they just slipped off at the end. But yeah, on JPR Williams, I mean, the stories I've heard from multiple people regarding him has just been positive. And I mean, he's gone down as a rugby legend with Gareth Edwards and the Brian Williamses of those eras. So yeah,
Yeah.
sad loss for rugby, but he's a legend.
No, 100%, 100%. Gentlemen, our lineup is quite intense. Our lineup is quite good. We're going to cover some of the games, obviously, that have taken place on Friday and Saturday. And obviously, looking at the results from today in the Investec Championship. We're going to look at, obviously, some of the headlines that have taken place in the past week. We've got the Allblacks that have gone to camp way too early into the season. We've got Clive Woodward, who's been removed from ITV. You can probably share some insight regarding that particular aspect. We've got Six Nation squads that are going to be announced soon. I think it's next week, if I'm not mistaken. And then after that, obviously, we want to look at New Zealand sides that will be participating in the cross-border rugby championship as well. There's a lot to cover. There's Andy Farrell, who's been named as the Lions coach, and obviously, we want to look at how the South African teams fare in the Investec competition, and some of the URC teams. How do they fare this past weekend as well? We look at Hacjivah Dayimani. Does he deserve to be named in the Springbok squad? Who knows? Anyway, we'll start off with the ITV news. Clive Woodward has been removed. Obviously, I saw a lot of people on the social media, on my timeline, being very excited about this news. I mean, Clive Woodward won the World Cup. He's the only Northern Hemisphere coach to win a World Cup. He's been very excellent as a rugby coach, but obviously the downfall probably started in 2005 when he took the BNI side to New Zealand, and they were thumped there 3-0, 0-3 rather. But his punditry, his analysis, his game breakdown on TV hasn't been well accepted by the UK fan base. I mean, what do you make of Clive Woodward being removed from ITV?
Yeah, I like to be a source of positivity, so I'll keep talking about Clive Woodward short. It was felt that his punditry was very much out of touch. Yes, he won the World Cup 20 years ago, but it felt like to some, and the running joke was that he stopped watching rugby the day that he won the World Cup, and yet he was still on our TV trying to tell us about it. He openly admitted live on television to not knowing who players were, to not having watched teams he was commentating on or doing punditry on. Yeah, very disappointing. His views on head contact laws in particular felt very out of touch a lot of the time. His views on some tier 2 nations, in particularly the Pacific Islanders, in terms of how he felt that they should be playing the game and things, also not very up to date. Yeah, just yeah. You never really learned anything from watching Clive Woodward. And yeah, he made mistakes. He, like I said, he admitted to not knowing who players and teams were. So just not. I think his time had come. I think it's fair to say.
Scoop, you there?
Cheetahs are in town and they got load shedding in Amsterdam. I think it's DC.
Yeah, I think let's Jade. I think you take it in. What's your comments on Clive Woodward?
I don't really have much to say about him. I mean, I haven't really been a fan of him. Kudos to him for winning the World Cup and the job he done with England in 2003. But after that, I mean, the news that we received in South Africa regarding Clive Woodward has all been negative. I mean, it's always been bashing the box or bashing some hemisphere teams. There was a few blunders he made in the World Cup. I mean, it made headlines to Africa. We don't see much of him in South Africa, luckily, because, I mean, we don't really focus a lot on ITV. So, but I mean, if I read the Daily Mail, his articles that he's writing up on there, it's been, I guess, it's been real negative towards, the modern era and the modern era rugby. So, yeah, for me, I'm glad he's gone, so it's fine.
All right, fair enough. Guys, I want to tap into this weekend's round of Investec Rugby Championship. We've had plenty of teams. We've had on Friday the Saints thumping Bayonne, the French team, which seems to have put out a second string side. There seems to be a notion, there seems to be a trend within the Investec Rugby competition in terms of teams putting out not their second string, but obviously giving chances to their bench to eventually kind of start games. And there is a trend, obviously, with certain clubs, you doing that. I mean, the Blue Bulls also sent some of their second string players. We heard Jake White complaining in his pre-match interview about obviously having to rest Springbok players and not take Springbok players against the Bears on Saturday. But eventually they won the game. But what is your guys' take, Vuyo? Maybe let me start with you. What is your take with regards to teams putting out their second string side, or is there too much rugby at this current point where teams need to have at least a squad of 50 to 60 players?
Yeah, so for my side, I think it's just a matter of trying to manage and balance the load within the squad. I think it is, for me, I am for the resting of the players. I am for the resting of the you could say the Springbok players, because your national team players, because they end up playing a lot of rugby, and there was no, and also because the game has gone into such a physical impact in the past 10 years. It's brutal on the body, so you do need some time to recover. But I think, like, if you can make, I think it all depends on if you can make your playoffs with actually minimum, using your top players minimum. I think that is best for coaches. But I still think maybe there's a scope in checking if a team does need to win a rugby game, and they need to win that game to make it to a quarters. I think there should be some sort of leeway from the national board to say that, look, these players need to be used by their club, because it also benefits everyone when teams are playing playoffs. So I think there is some scope in that, but I am for that. If your competition is already in the right way, then I don't think you should be using your top players till the later end of the tournament.
Yeah, fair enough. And Hugh, your thoughts on this particular subject?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. The rugby calendar in the Northern Hemisphere, I think there's a bit of a legacy from a bygone time when the rugby calendar tried to emulate the football calendar. And obviously, football it is played weekends and midweek as well. And there was a time a long time ago when rugby games could be played midweek, but those times are gone. I had a bit of a play around with, my Excel sheets and things. And if you lay out all of the URC games, all of the international games in the Northern Hemisphere, and all of the Champions Cup, Challenge Cup games in the format that we used to have, and try and make them not clash with each other, and try to put in rest weeks here and there. There's more rugby matches than there are weeks in the year, so it's a necessary evil, I'm afraid. I just don't think it's sustainable for international level players, at least, to play every week. And then you throw in the travel and things on top of that, and it just becomes untenable, really. And you go look after these guys. You have to remember that the ones who've just come back from a World Cup, they've just had probably the most physically demanding experience maybe any athlete goes through playing at a Rugby World Cup. So you have to have understanding with them. Obviously, it didn't hurt the Bulls. They dusted Bristol pretty easily. And the Stormers and Sharks managed to keep hold of their internationals to win their games. And the Lions actually put on a pretty good show, I thought, up in Montpellier, despite not getting the results. So it's not impacted them too hard. Yeah, I think it's totally within each union's prerogative to manage their players as they see fit. And it's just a reality, really. I think whilst we continue to want to have a European competition, this is going to be part of it. And exactly as Vuyo says, the way that it's structured at the moment, and it goes for the leagues as well, where you need to get top 8 or you need to get top 4 in your pool, you don't need to win every game. So why take the risk? That's just the reality, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Jade, your thoughts?
I think in the week, I agree with Vuyo and you regarding player safety and player welfare. We need to also be careful because it has also but Leinster in the butt a few times. Not getting guys to peak in playoff competition or in playoff rounds. It has hurt them a few times in the past seasons. But I think it was Razor Robertson that said in his camp that you need to also understand from a player's perspective and listen to the player that if a player's come back from injury, he wants to have a run of maybe 5, 6, 7 games, to get into the swing of things. So you also need to listen to the player and, you have these protective, rest periods and you have all of the rules and regulations, but certain things also come down to the player as well. You need to also listen to the player. The player feels that he needs a break. We can give him a 2-week break instead of just a week, just to freshen him up, and then he can go for 5, 6, 7 weeks on into the latter stages. So, yeah, there's a lot of factors that plays around with this, but I think player welfare, and especially in Europe and the Northern Hemisphere, the competition is long. It's impossible for these guys to play every week. It's not NBA, so yeah, I think these guys, they need to be well rested and need to be well managed. If we're going to get them to peak in the playoff stages of the competition.
Yeah, fair enough. But now getting into the nitty-gritty of the actual competition itself, looking at where the South African teams are on the logs in their groups, we're not really putting our best foot forward currently. Is there a significance within what happens at URC and what happens in Investec? Which competition do you, Vuyo, think that South African teams are probably taking more seriously between the URC and the Investec Championship Cup?
Yeah, I think all the teams it depends on what the current state where they are. For example, the Lions and the Sharks will be thinking differently. They won't be thinking the same in terms of the getting into that Investec Championship. In terms of that's not their focus. Their focus is to actually try and stay in the top 8 for URC. And I think that's what most teams are within that European setup, that URC setup, is that they will focus a lot on getting into the top 8 so that they can at least have a chance of playing the Heineken Cup. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's still called that, but for me, I think it all depends on the different teams. It all depends on which teams are what's a current situation within that team. And if you look at the Sharks at the moment, they're at the bottom of the log, so they probably won't be thinking we can make top 8, but maybe they'll be thinking maybe for us to go and win this other championship, because that will be bringing a little bit more traction towards our system. And so it all depends on the club, but for me, it's always been URC, it's Heineken Cup URC. So I've always ranked them that way. But some guys obviously feel differently. And also money-wise, we also have to think money-wise in terms of the monetary value, which one is more... I know the South African teams benefit a lot more from URC because of the TV rights that they get. But other than that, it all depends on which province, obviously, what they're looking for the current season.
Yeah, I get that. Hugh, you guys in the UK have been involved within Heineken / Investec Cup Championship, whatever it's called, for a number of years now. But for the UK, I mean, looking at the broader aspect of it, England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland as well. I mean, which one would be more prominent? Which one would teams take more seriously? Because, I mean, these competitions are running concurrently throughout the season anyway. Which one would be more... which one would you guys take more seriously going into every season?
The Champions Cup is viewed as the pinnacle. So it's a bit like the Champions League in football, where that's the top competition. Europe is viewed as the top competition. And if you win that, you are the best. You're not just the best in your own country, you're the best in all of Europe. And it's special. And that's why clubs like Toulon and Leinster have stars on their badges, on their jerseys, to represent how many Champions Cups they've won. It goes club by club, though, and there are some clubs who don't prioritise Europe, especially if they're in the Challenge Cup, so that they can get into the playoffs for their leagues. Northampton is a club that's done that a lot in recent years, but they're looking very good in Europe this year, so that's a change from them. So, yeah, I think it's fair to say that the Irish in particular, from speaking to a lot of Irish fans, they put Champions Cup first. They say our season starts with Europe, which I'm not sure how true that is for the clubs anymore, but we saw obviously from Leinster in their semi-final last year where they tried to put out the B team against Munster so they could prioritise Europe, and they ended up winning neither. But yeah, and for the Welsh, it's just if we can win any game these days, it's a nice result. So yeah, that mostly Europe is seen as the pinnacle, but that might be changing. What I will say is that if a South African team wins it, and I do believe that the Bulls are in with a chance of winning it this season, that I want to see that happen just for how furious all of the English pundits get and how they all lose their minds. That is a day I want to be alive for.
Speaking of the Bulls, I wanted to direct Jade because I think Jade, myself, and Hugh, actually, we've all put our money on the Blue Bulls since the beginning of the season. But obviously, with caution. Jade, looking at the Blue Bulls currently, I mean, they are in a very good position. I think Jake White took the lessons of the past two seasons and he's basically set up a good foundation. He's set up He's set up a group of players that can actually travel to England, as we saw yesterday, and can actually come off with a win. I mean, the Blues were ferocious on defense. They were brilliant in the scrums. Everything turned out well for them. The 50-50s were going their way. But looking at the broader aspect of the current Blue Bulls setup, it's been 4.5 months or so now into the season. How do you think their chances are in terms of winning both Investec Championship and the URC?
With the Bulls, it's tricky because I believe that if you see what's happening at the Sharks, the Bulls had a similar approach for like 3 years where they were just getting stars left, right, and center into the team, getting the likes of Vuyo Uplon, I think, Nazim, but there were so many guys, coming back from Europe and being filtered into the Bulls team. And it took them a while to actually get to get the balance right, especially with the academy and what they do have at that academy, the Bulls Academy, because they've been cleaning up, at under 19 and under 21 level. They have a really, really good system going there. I spoke to somebody earlier in the week and I said they have one of the best up-and-coming youngsters. I mean, one of the best academies up-and-coming. They're up there. They could match Leinster, or the Chiefs as well. So Jake did his own planning. It took him a few years to get it right. They had some harder results as well. They had some big results in there. I mean, they beat Leinster in Ireland just 2 years ago to make the final and lost in the final against the Stormers. And it's actually they've been learning as they've been going on. Just last year, they had a horror show with these youngsters that they've been praising. So now they just had a horror show in the Currie Cup where it cost, unfortunately, Eka Martule his job 3 games into the Currie Cup. But that's the Bulls. They've been taking the learnings as they've been going on. And the players they brought in this year, and the players coming through, like Johanna Combs and your Akker that came back, Fali Leroux, I think Stedman Hans understands his role in the Bulls team. Those guys just fit. They complement the squad and they complement each other. So I'm not a big Jake White fan in terms of coaching. I'm not a big, massive Jake White fan. I'm not saying this is all his work because they've got a very good recruitment team there, but they set up the whole Bulls is set up with the youngsters they're getting in, with the academy, the rugby developer. With we spoke about him last week with Vessel du Plessis that's involved there as well. The coaches that they're getting on board, they're picking up good players and they're developing these guys. And to be honest, the only team that's really a thorn in his side has been the Stormers, and they just can't get over that hurdle, beating the Stormers. So for me, I think it's a long shot, for them to win the Investec Cup this year, to win European Cup, or to win the UFC, because I still think maybe the Stormers and Leinster and La Rochelle, what's the other teams, and Racing are still a step ahead of them, but they're going in the right direction. And I just think the planning has been right, over the past 24 months. They made mistakes, but they made that mistakes right, with the recruitment.
Yeah, fair enough. Speaking of recruitment, Vuyo, off topic, or actually similar conversation, but I want to refer it to the Sharks. I mean, last week we did dissect and break down the Sharks as well, of their problems that they have in KZN. But a while back, I think I remember growing up, there was something called a Sharks Academy, which now it seems like the Blue Bulls have adopted that foundation, have adopted that platform, and Jake White is trying to create a similar program into the Blue Bulls. I mean, the Sharks used to have a prominent rugby academy where players used to filter through, and the Sharks were actually going steady and being in a good position to have youngsters that are coming through into their system. And at the moment, it seems like there's been a disconnect. They've been disjointed, and there doesn't seem to be a Sharks Academy that actually filters through the young players that we used to from previous years. Is the Sharks Academy still around for you?
I'll be honest, I'm not sure, but I think it is still around. I think HN Finn is running that setup, but it probably obviously has changed within the last few years because when Hans Scriver was running the Sharks Academy, there was a deal between obviously the coachings and there was an alignment within that in terms of whatever players that were signed by the Sharks Academy. There were players that were paying, there were players that were getting a half, you could say scholarship, a bursary, and then there were players that were not paying anything because obviously those players were being earmarked to represent the Sharks. So it has changed. I think it has changed. I'm not quite sure what is the setup there at the moment, but I think last year I read that last year that HN Finn is still running the Sharks Academy, and he was being helped by Loazim Vova as the coach and JP Peterson. So that's how they. But I do think, but you're spot on in something about there seems to be a disconnect between what is needed, because now that they have the money, they probably wanting to buy the team instead of looking at their homegrown players that have been playing in their systems from school level, because they still have a good school system. I think Sharks have one of the best school systems as well. So it's now losing those players because they too focused on what's happening at the top. So I think it is in that sense. But to answer your question, I think there is still a Sharks Academy, but if how it's ran, it's a different story.
No, fair enough. Hugh, I want to bring you onto this one and put you to the test on this particular one. We've got a player who's playing for the Stormers. Fantastic footballer, fantastic athlete. He's got the ball skills. He's got the footwork. He's got the speed. He's got the ability to run people over, but his overall skill set is amazing. Hacjivah Dayimani, what are your thoughts on this particular player?
Oof, what a player. I hope the Springboks pick him and they don't pick Cameron Hanekom so that Wales can have Hanekom. So the stat for you, the Sales Sharks missed 31 tackles in the game, and 10 of those missed tackles were Dayimani. there was one where he broke down the length of the field, and he was trying to do a pass, and I was like, just keep hold of it, bro. You'll get over in the corner if you just go yourself. Sensational. He when at club level, and particularly at European level, if you can look that good and that stand out from all the rest, that normally is a sign for me that you are going to work at international level. Now, being the Springbok number 8 is big shoes to fill. Obviously, big Dwayne Vermeulen is out of the picture now. Visa is still around, but there's another spot there. Quagga can obviously play at number 8 as well, but yeah, he's a little bit raw. His decision making, maybe every now and again. But there's something about the Stormers just generally is they tend to get a bit excited. And sometimes I'm just like, guys, just keep the ball, kick it to the corners and just chill. But no, they have to do something incredible all the time. But yeah, this guy is exciting. Is exciting. And I know that I'm late to him. I know a lot of other people have been excited about him for a long time. So, but yeah, what a player.
Fantastic. Jade, there's a lot of players, obviously, within the Stormer setup. There's some players, loose forwards at the Blue Bulls as well. I don't think any of the Sharks loose forwards are knocking at the door at Springbok level, but maybe some of the players at the Bulls and at the Stormers are the ones that are prominent enough to represent their provinces at national level. Looking at the current setup, there's a lot of players, but Hacjivah Dayimani, do you think it's time this year?
Yeah, I think so. I think Hacjivah Dayimani, when he was at the Lions, we all saw him rip it apart in Super, and I think it was 2018, 2019. We saw that he was knocking on the door, and then he just went. I don't know what happened in his career, but he went flat. There was a time when he joined the Sevens as well, to spark up his career, but it never really kicked on. And the first season in the Stormers, coming off from the bench, playing that role when they won the UFC, he was a very good impact player, and he changed the game. Last season he was a little bit quiet, but this season the guy's been amazing. I think him and Ulrich Low from the Bulls has been two of my standard loose forwards from an active perspective. And Hacjivah Dayimani definitely deserves to be in the squad. I think he can learn a lot, and I think he is. If he's not going to start coming from the bench, he's a game changer. He can play, 6 or 7. I mean, he can play 7 or 8, and he's brilliant. He deserves to be in the squad at least.
Sticking with you, Jade, I mean, at national level, you see him as an 8, or do you see him as a 7?
Depends on your game plan, Scoop. Depends on your game plan. Quagga's done well at 8 when he's played 8. But it depends on your game plan in your opposition, who you're playing. I mean, we've all said that you need a big ball running number 8, but we looked at what Quagga did when he played 8, and you look at what Adi Savia does when he played 8, compared to Aldrit and all of those bigger guys, traditional guys like for Vermeulen or so. So it depends on your game plan. Obviously, it's very difficult for him at international level to come in and replace Peter Step du Toit, who was, he's a shoe-in in the team. He's world class. So as for him, also, Rassie can also use him from the bench, maybe at 7 or 8, and see how he adapts, because certain people adapt definitely in certain positions depending on who they're playing with, So yeah, I think it's up to Rassie to see what is his best position in that squad. But for me, 7 or 8 doesn't really matter. I think he has the tools to make it.
Fair. Vuyo, as a coach, I mean, you probably smile every time you see Hacjivah Dayimani get the ball. What have you made of his overall skill set? I mean, what do you look at that impresses you so much when you look at Hacjivah Dayimani? And maybe what can he work on going forward? Because like Jade said, we've seen him at the Lions. He really used to razzle and dazzle, but everything went pear-shaped. Once he left the Lions, he had to find his feet again, and he had to find his form. He went to Dobo. Dobo was able to rejuvenate his rugby passion, and now we're looking at him 2 seasons in at URC level, and he hasn't stopped performing. He's gaining yards, he's gaining meters, he's beating people on the outside. overs lines, unders lines. He's got ball skills where he passes from the back. All we're needing now is for him to pass the ball between his legs, like Carlos Spencer.
My favorite, one of my top players, that one. I think if we have to talk about Dayimani, I think for me, I'll differ a little to the guys in terms of that call up, that Springbok call up. I think yes, he will probably be adding value with South Africa. I mean, if you're going to a 6-2 or 7-1 split, he's the guy who can probably cover your wing and with no worries about pace at all. I think. But for me, I think it's what's different is the fact that Dayimani, he likes a loose game, and in international rugby, you cannot be that loose. And also, I mean, we have to talk about his physicality, and I think that's where a guy like Erlich Low, Evan Ross will pip in my head. I think looking at him going to 7, yes, definitely as a 7. I think maybe he's a guy that we can use to rest Peter Steff in terms of he'll be a workhorse. He'll be almost like your workhorse, where Peter Steff is doing that job brilliantly at the moment. So I think as a 7, yes, I see him, but as an 8, that position is quite full. I was actually talking to another mate last year and saying, if the Springboks wanted to build a good loose forwards base, they would actually involve Evan Ross, Ulrich Low, and Pepsi Buthelezi into that system. But obviously, we see Pepsi isn't overstepping up physicality wise, and that's one thing that Hacjivah will probably get ahead of Pepsi at the moment, is that he's got the ball skills, he's quicker, he can avoid defenders. The only thing is that he will be able to be physical. It will probably go back to our conversations about Marvin Orie at lock for the Springboks. So it's something similar, but I think look, the kid is doing well. You can see he's enjoying his rugby, and something a lot of people will never understand. Something has to do with you as a rugby player being married. That's what I say, because it just makes you like you're more calmer, you're more focused on what you're supposed to do instead of gallivanting the streets and going around Camps Bay, Cape Town, and doing things. So just for me, I think that definitely has played a factor in his career at the moment.
Okay, listeners, you heard it here first. Get married and everything, and you'll get all your blessings. Wow, very funny, Vuyo. But gents, moving on along, we've got the Sevens Olympics coming up soon as well, and I wanted Vuyo maybe to share a bit of expertise and experience within this regard. We've got Michael Hooper for the Australian team. We've got Antoine Dupont, who's also been involved with the French Sevens team. What I wanted to understand, we've seen maybe some major stars before joining the Sevens element, but with regards to Michael Hooper, he might not be able to make the Olympics team because of certain fitness levels or requirements within Sevens. You're well versed within this particular topic. I mean, with Antoine Dupont as well, because rugby Sevens is totally different from 15s. There's certain intricacies that are involved where players need to play certain amount of games to actually get the gist and the understanding of those dynamics. I mean, can you share some light on this particular topic for you?
Yeah, I think, look, I haven't followed much on French rugby, obviously, because most of their news articles are in French, so it is a little bit more difficult to understand. But if I think maybe it's actually they're playing end of this month, which is 2 weekends from now. They'll be playing in Perth, and I think that's where we will see if Antoine will make the squad for French team. But the head coach of Australia, has come out and said that he will not be selecting Michael, because obviously he said there's a couple of things that he still needs to learn and he still lacks on. So I mean, we all know Michael. He's one of those workhorses on the field. He doesn't stop running. He doesn't stop. He's always chasing. He's always trying to make turnovers, disrupting the breakdown. And in sevens, it is a little bit different because of the structural defense patterns and the attack patterns. So you don't need to run everywhere, but you need to be dominant in certain areas. So maybe at the moment, for what they see is that he's probably struggling within that one-on-one defense, because that is quite vital as well. How you adapt in terms of stopping players one-on-one, and that's why most stars will need a couple of tournaments to try and get obviously that rhythm within the game. So if Michael is not selected for if Michael Hooper is not selected for this for this end of the month tournament, that means that he will have 5 tournaments to try and make the Olympic squad. So it is going to be very difficult unless he comes in and he is a beast in those couple of tournaments, and then definitely that'll put him into contention. Because I think he'll make a very good tight head. I think he'll make a very good tight head because he'll be on the touch lines, but also on defense, he'll be mostly in the middle, which is he can make those tackles and make those turnovers. So yeah, it is a little bit, it is different. It is definitely different. Your fitness levels have to be 10 times higher than what a normal 15s rugby player goes through. But other than that, I think, because he's that kind of player, that he's got the experience, it might help him. But with game time, with not having much game time, I think then it will go against him. So it will be interesting to see what France do with Anton. But as Australia has come out and said, it is they will not be selecting for this Perth round, but hopefully we'll get to see him in the next few months.
Yes, Jade, you want to chime in there?
Yeah, man, it's something I wanted to ask Vuyo a few times already while watching the Sevens circuit this year, especially. I mean, it's evident that, Fiji has become weaker because of the Drua and a lot of the players like Ronnie Sau and, those guys who are on the circus every weekend. They play now for the Drua in Super Rugby. But I mean, Fiji guys are what you call in terms of sevens, they top fit, so they just plug and play, and they're ready to ball at sevens. They don't need really that much of an adaptation to the game. But here's my question. I mean, we've seen the glamour of the Olympic Games in 2015, where we saw guys like from New Zealand. I think it was Audie Savia, it was Sonny Bill Messam. They all put their hands up to be selected. Later on, Audie withdrew, but it was 2017 or so. But later on, we haven't really seen those stars coming up. And I mean, from 15s going into sevens, going back into sevens. Is it too much strain on their body? Is it a financial thing? Or is it not anymore, that the Olympic Games is not so much of a goal for them to achieve? I mean, we've seen the last time was Caleb Clark for New Zealand, that he left the black jersey and he went to the Olympic squad. He never made the squad eventually. He was a reserve. He sat in the hotel the whole time. We've seen Jason Colby and Abana, put their hands up a few times, but there hasn't been any noise or rumors of, big stars apart from Hooper and Pont to make the code. Is this the shift? Is it that much? Has the game changed so much that? Remember, in the past, we could have guys like Juast and Bobby Skinstad just going into a World Cup and playing in the Sevens World Cup, Cullen and Lomo, than those guys. But has the game changed that much? Is it a completely different game compared to 15s now? Is it so much harder to adapt once you've gone from sevens to 15s? What would a guy like Kwacha, how long would he take to come back into sevens, for example, in order to make the Olympic squad? What is the difference? How much has the 15-man game and the sevens game grown apart over the last decade or so?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said there's too much strain on their bodies. I think that's the first thing. I think once players move from sevens to 15s, they get to actually realize how much less running they do in 15s, how much less fitness they do. Yes, the game is more physical and contact based, but for any player to go through a sevens, build up for a tournament, it is massive. It is tough. I mean, we normally do a 3-week build up to a tournament so that the guys can peak at tournament level. And I mean, that is brutal on the body. It is brutal. You get guys not making all the sessions because all of a sudden a guy is getting sick because of the immune system has dropped. So there's a whole lot of things that you need for you to be able to actually play in the seven setup. I think there are some natural fit players. There are some natural, for example, probably Chesney wouldn't take him that long. Kwagga Smith is quite fit, so it wouldn't take him that long to adapt within the system. But if you bring a guy, for example, like let's make an example about Michael Hooper, who's carrying a lot of weight from 15s because he needed to be in a certain weight category. Now he's carrying a lot of weight. Whereas in sevens, we don't regard weight. We don't look at weight. We look at how this player can be physical within the weight that they can be in the best form of best shape. So when we did a structural scouting booklet, we looked at guys weighing 95 kgs to 100. I mean, some of these kids now are weighing 110, 120. That person is definitely going to struggle around the park. And yes, they might be talented, but at the same time, if you don't have the ball in sevens, if your team is on the defensive the whole time in the game, then you need that fitness to kick in. Otherwise, it is a little bit more heavy and it is a bit more tricky. The game has totally changed. The sevens game now has totally changed from when it was way back, because way back it was more like a play around, let's mess around. But now it's more technical, it's more focused on certain things. For example, with my teams, if I'm coaching a team and we're playing in a tournament, I always have a 3-ruck rule. After 3 rucks, there mustn't be any play. There must either be a penalty, there must be a stoppage. But it's because of the demand on the body when you're always on defense. So yeah, it's one of those things where you have to get yourself into obviously good shape, but also, unfortunately, a lot of people will say I'm wrong, but you do need to have that kind of natural fitness from a young age.
Oof. Demand, guys, demand on the body. Sevens has basically turned into a high profile and a very demanding sport at this point in time. Listening to what Vuyo has said, thanks Vuyo for sharing those expertise as well within the particular aspect. Going forward now, looking at what has transpired over the week as well, was Lions' new head coach, Andy Farrell. Hugh, you might give us some feedback from the UK. How was this news received in the UK?
Yeah, no contest really. With Borthwick and Gatland both being new into the jobs, I don't know if Gatland has ruled himself out, or maybe the last tour didn't go that great. Or maybe they just felt they needed something fresh in Andy Farrell. Of course, this isn't Andy Farrell's first Lions tour. He was the defence coach for the Lions since Australia 2013. Yes. And yeah, what he's managed to turn Ireland into, despite them falling slightly short in the quarterfinal, absolutely fully deserved. We've got absolutely no doubt in his credentials. It'll be interesting to see who he appoints as his assistants, and it will be interesting to see the impact on Ireland. I'm kind of half expecting Ireland to have a funny couple of years with Johnny Sexton going out and Farrell going off with the Lions, and maybe a couple of injuries here and there. They might have a bit of a wobble this year and next year, but in terms of for the Lions, yeah, Andy Farrell for me, there was the only choice.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, Joe, go on for you.
Yeah, so what you're saying is basically that Jacques Naba might become the defense coach for the Lions.
Can you imagine?
It could be.
Guys, we're only playing Australia. I could be the defense coach.
Oh, jeez, hectic. You are still on
joking.
But Jen, sticking with the Lions, I mean, who would you then like to see as his support staff? I mean, with Andy Farrell, do you think will be there? Gatland, Borthwick will be there?
No, I don't think he'll appoint either. I don't think he'll appoint Gatland because Farrell was Gatland's assistant. So I don't feel like that they would swap that dynamic around, and I don't think that the WRU would be happy to let. Well, I hope they wouldn't be happy to let Wales's head coach go and be an assistant to the Lions. Last tour, Gregor Townsend was Gatland's assistant. I do think Gatland has a seniority over Gregor in terms of years and experience and what he's achieved, so that kind of was okay. I've really got no idea. I think the thing with the Lions is, by the time we get to the Lions tour in 2 years' time, there will be people who will start those Lions tours games who we're not even talking about right now, who some of us have never even heard of right now. So to even try and predict who is going to be the personalities, either in the team or in the coaching staff, this far out, it's not worth it, in my opinion.
So just to get this right as well, so since Andy Farrell is the head coach now, does he still commence with his duties as an Irish head coach into this year's Six Nations, or does he sit that one out?
This year, probably. So Gatland would do it the year that he was doing, or the season, I should say, that he was doing the Lions, he took that season out. So both times in 13 and 17, Rob Howley took over. And obviously, by the time it came to 2021, Gatland had left Wales, so Pivac was full in charge of Wales. But it was an assistant who took over for Gatland for one season. So I would imagine Farrell will do the same. I don't know exactly how he's going to do it. I would presume it'll be the same.
No, fair enough. That makes sense then. Moving on, Jade, this is your speciality. We've seen the New Zealand rugby sides advertising cross-border rugby. This is an exciting time for the people down under, or in Australasia, if you prefer. What do you make of the cross-border rugby championship, where all the New Zealand Super Rugby sides will take on the Japanese League One teams? I think it's once off, or it's for 2 weekends back to back. I mean, what is your take currently with this competition?
Well, Scoop, it's coming. There's no secret that Super Rugby has to do something to protect their game. The game is growing up in the north. They need to really be innovative with new competition, or adding new teams, or cutting teams, etc. So the Japanese market is something they are looking at tapping into. It's very difficult because of the financial power that those Japanese clubs have. It's very difficult. But this cross competition has been coming. It's exciting. We'll basically see a few familiar faces playing against each other. Hopefully these Japanese clubs allow the likes of Peter Stephen, Kobe, Audi, and those guys to have a run against the New Zealand teams. So, yeah, it's exciting. It's something new. There's opportunity for it to grow, next year to get bigger, and, to move on like that. So maybe after 2027 World Cup, they can really look at throwing in those Japanese teams into Super Rugby. So it's a start of something. As you know, when something does start, there will be a few bumps along the way and a few negative criticism along the way. But for now, it's just something that they can grow, a partnership with Japanese rugby, to promote the game down south.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Agreed. Vuyo, last week we had a very hectic or very intense debate about coaching aspects, and obviously foundation and philosophy within the coaching structures, and how coaches come into a setup and obviously implement those structures. How coaches come into a setup and introduce their philosophy to the players, and it's always up to the players to buy into the coaches' structures and foundation, etc. This week we saw the new All Blacks head coach in Razor, Scott Robertson, and he's already held his first camp, and he's already put out what his foundation is. He's already put out what his philosophy is to the squad that actually played in the World Cup. Those who haven't retired, of course, that will still continue to play in the next year or so. What is your take on, holding the first camp in January already? The guys are still training or doing their fitness training with their clubs for Super Rugby. But what is your overall take on this current situation with Razor taking over and holding his first camp in January?
Yeah, I think it's quite a smart idea, because in terms of what, like you're saying, philosophies and how we're going to play, the players need to understand that from the coach. And if he waits till the tournament, Super Rugby tournament starts, then he's going to have to pick and see weekends where he can have alignment camps, like what Rassie used to do with the South African sides. So it is, I think for me, it's a smart idea in terms of just getting your players to understand that there's going to be a different coaching staff, and this is how we're going to do things. You got a couple of months to understand that this is how we're going to do things. So you can't wait till. Usually, I don't know if it's still the same. We used to finish Super Rugby, and then 2 weeks later, you're playing your first test, which is your inbound first test or summer, what they call European summer tour. So for us, I think it as coaches, it just you by having that, you just basically canceling out whatever that was done before and saying that, guys, there's a new coaching staff, and this is how we're going to do things. And also when the players meet the coach, it's always a good thing, because then you will understand who you're gonna be dealing with when it comes to international rugby. And also when you start to perform, you almost like will know if you're not gonna make the squad or not, based on what the coaches have told you guys in that camp. So it's one of those things where I think for me it was a brilliant one to start, just to settle the nerves and make sure that the players continue building that New Zealand jersey.
Hugh?
Yeah, I agree. It's completely smart. When you've got a change of coach, that's always going to be an adjustment period. And if you can get a head start on that by getting players in already, why not? It obviously is a big advantage that New Zealanders have. And this is not something I'm saying for the first time about how their calendar is set up, that the All Blacks are essentially a club side. I think the All Blacks play as many games as the Super Rugby franchises play. And they play them all back to back as well. So I'm surprised, honestly, that all the other nations in the world don't make more of a fuss about how much of an advantage New Zealand have with their calendar, that they can do things like this. But if you are the All Blacks, why not? If you can do it, go for it. And I agree with Vuyo. It's completely smart. Go for
it. An advantage, Hugh says. Jade, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's true, but also understand that where those guys, that never moved on to Japan and France, what happened to them after the World Cup. I mean, they lost in the final. Obviously, those guys needed a clean slate. They have been hurting. They had about 2 months to mourn after the World Cup. And it's just to get them together again. And also for Razor, looking at Razor, Jason Ryan, Jason Holland, Ian McDonald, new coaching setup of Wayne Smith as well. All of those guys have either coached Canterbury or been a part of the Crusaders, in the past. So it might just also get that. If I'm not a part of the Crusaders, I might not just make the All Black team. It's just to throw that out the window as well for Razor to tell the other guys, listen, this is what I expect of you. Go and tear it up in Super Rugby. I am looking at you. I'm keeping a close eye on you. And those guys who are in the camp would also be licking their lips and working harder. I want to be a part of that. I've seen the videos. I've seen how it looks in that camp. Razor's creating a good environment. Let me work my ass off to get into that environment as well. So it's a smart move. Razor's a smart guy. I think it's something they needed to do last year already, with Foster. They never done it. I can't remember when last New Zealand Rugby has had a camp like this. I know South Africa had camps and Australia did, but they never done it. Foster never done it. Most probably was playing noughts and crosses while watching the Super Rugby. But yeah, that's enough for Foster. But yeah, I agree with Razor and I agree with what he done. I think it's a smart move for New Zealand to start on a clean page, after the World Cup.
Fair enough. You?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Jade kind of on that, because when I was going through the All Black squad last year, I was quite surprised at how few Crusaders were in there, considering obviously the domination of Super Rugby they've had. And when we're talking about Razor getting his new ideas across, they can obviously shortcut that just by picking a whole heap of Crusaders into the All Black squad. Do you expect that to happen, or do you think it will be minimal changes from the current squad, which was surprisingly light on Crusaders at times?
Well, that's difficult because, the game moves fast. Within the space of a year or two, the game moved and there's new trendsetters in the game. So it's difficult to say, obviously Crusaders has had a solid foundation under Razor for the past 7 years. But then again, if you look at the All Black squad this year, majority of the guys were from the Blues and the Chiefs, basically. Not the Chiefs, but the Blues, were the bulk of the squad, basically, of match 23. So I guess different coaches have different ideas, but I do see I don't see him going strictly at staunch on Crusader players because there's a few Crusaders players that have left, the likes of Whitelock, etc. But I do see that if he is a coin toss, between a Cullen Grace or a Ake to be a part of the squad. If it is a coin toss, he would obviously lean towards Cullen Grace because he has worked with it before the Crusaders, so that would be the advantage. But yeah, where he has collected his coaching staff from, Jason Rowland always worked with the Hurricanes, and we had Leon McDonald has come from the Blues, and obviously they have both worked with Clinton McMillan, who has been at the Chiefs, with the Maori and the New Zealand invitational team as well. So they have a good relationship with him as well. So I don't think it will just be Crusaders dominant, but they could have that, where there's a coin toss between two players and he has worked previously with the Crusaders. That's where it could come in advantage. I guess it's the same for both coaches, actually. It's maybe a general thing when it comes to coaching and a 50-50 decision.
Right. Fantastically put, Jade. Guys, next week we will be touching on a lot of aspects, the changes that will be within the Springbok setup, looking into 2024 and 2025, and obviously what will take place in the next week is the announcement of the Six Nations teams. We'll also be looking into that and looking into the Six Nations itself as an overall tournament and who is likely to win this year's Six Nations. There's also a documentary coming out in a week's time as well regarding rugby on Netflix. This is the coverage of last year's Six Nations, and let's hope that will basically bring more supporters and new fans into the game. But thank you very much, Vuyo Sangma. Thank you very much, Hugh Griffin. And thank you, Jade, for joining us. And thank you to the listeners for joining in, guys. It's been a brilliant show. Thanks for listening in. And I hope to see you guys next week. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks. Just a special shout out quickly to all of those guys going back to training this week, pre-season training, club rugby. If you're over 35 and you're playing 13 club rugby, we know you're just playing rugby to get away from the house. Please, guys, retire.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Cadence.